I always thought I knew my wife, until the subtle inconsistencies started to accumulate. At first it was just extra minutes to get ready, but then her meetings with friends became more frequent and I started to notice strange details, a car that never left our driveway, selfies posted from our own Wi-Fi, and quiet whispers behind closed doors. Something was not adding up. I always believed that marriage was built on trust and the quiet rhythms of everyday life. Rebecca and I had shared years of laughter, dreams, and even the occasional silent moments that spoke louder than words. But over the past several months, a subtle shift had begun to unravel the tapestry of our routine. It started with small, almost imperceptible changes, a new sparkle in her eyes when she mentioned meeting up with her friends, or the extra minutes she spent preparing before leaving the house. At first, I chalked it up to a midlife reinvention, a rekindling of social interests that had lain dormant for too long. Yet, deep down, something felt off. One ordinary Tuesday evening, as the golden light of sunset filtered through our living room, Rebecca announced that she was meeting some friends for a dinner that had just come up. I nodded, trusting her too readily, but a lingering doubt settled over me like a shadow. It wasn't the idea of her going out, after all, she deserved her freedom, but rather the careful precision with which she crafted each excuse. I recalled how, not too long ago, she had mentioned a book club meeting that I later learned had been cancelled weeks ago. Now, her stories seemed too rehearsed, too polished. The spark in her eyes was there, but behind it lurked a guarded secret. As the weeks rolled on, the pattern grew undeniable. Rebecca's outings became more frequent, her return home always marked by a peculiar mix of fatigue and exhilaration. There were nights when I'd lie awake in bed, listening to the silence of our room, trying to decipher the hidden language of her absence. I began to notice minute details, a new, sophisticated perfume she wore, a subtle change in her style, and even an unfamiliar ringtone that she always hurriedly silenced. It was as if she were carefully constructing a facade, piece by delicate piece, masking the truth with the veneer of friendship. I found myself meticulously cataloging every discrepancy. My mind would replay our conversations, the way she mentioned meeting old college friends, yet I couldn't recall ever hearing her speak about them with such passion before. The stories didn't quite add up, they were too neat, too convenient. One evening, after an unusually long silence at dinner, I casually mentioned a mutual friend from her past. Her reaction, a fleeting flash of discomfort in her eyes, was all the confirmation I needed to set off on a quest for the truth. Every text message that pinged on her phone, every whispered conversation I overheard when I thought she wasn't listening, fueled my growing suspicion. One particularly restless night, driven by an unshakable intuition, I decided to retrace her steps. I watched the clock as the minutes ticked by, each one echoing with a mix of anticipation and dread. The house, once our sanctuary, felt oddly empty, a hollow stage where every missing piece of her presence shouted its absence. I started to wonder, were her friends merely a cover? The answers seemed to hide in the gaps between her carefully chosen words and the reality that I began to piece together on my own. The more I observed, the more I realized that the truth was far more complex than simple social outings. In the silent spaces of our home and the blurred memories of our past, I could sense a deliberate effort to distance herself from the life we once shared. And so, as I sat alone one cold night with nothing but my racing thoughts for company, I made a decision: I would uncover the real reason behind her newfound enthusiasm for these mysterious nights out. I didn't know where this path would lead, but I was certain that behind every excuse lay a secret, and behind every secret, a deeper betrayal. I ended that night with a heart heavy with both dread and determination. I knew that the calm facade of our marriage was a fragile illusion, and the truth, when revealed, might shatter it completely. Yet I was ready to face whatever lay ahead, even if it meant confronting the most painful realities about the woman I thought I knew so well. The days following my restless night were filled with an unsettling mix of determination and dread. I couldn't let the nagging feeling go, and so I began my own quiet investigation. Every time Rebecca announced an outing, I made sure to note the exact time, the car's position in the driveway, and any other detail that might either confirm her story or betray it. I soon discovered that, on multiple occasions, the car was still parked exactly where it had been the previous morning, even when she insisted she'd been out with her friends 4 hours. At first, I dismissed it as a minor oversight. Perhaps she simply left her car behind to save time, or maybe she'd borrowed a ride from one of them. But as the inconsistencies grew, so did my suspicions. My curiosity morphed into an obsession. I started to check the timestamps on the messages and social media updates she casually posted. I discovered that the posts she made, with cheerful selfies at supposed cafes or bars, were all sent from our home's Wi-Fi network. It was as if the vibrant world she described was a fabrication, meticulously crafted from within these very walls. One evening, as I sat alone in the quiet of our dimly lit living room, I recalled a specific moment, a hurried conversation on the phone where she mentioned meeting up with her friends at a popular downtown spot. Yet, I distinctly remembered her stepping into the house moments later, her eyes betraying an odd mixture of guilt and relief. I pressed my hand against my chest, feeling a dissonance that I couldn't quite place. Was it possible that Rebecca wasn't out at all? Had I been willingly deceived by the very person I trusted the most? Unable to shake the feeling that something was off, I decided to delve deeper. I installed a discreet app on my own phone to track the location of our home's Wi-Fi network, a simple trick I'd read about online, designed to reveal whether digital signals were emanating from any unexpected sources. The results were startling. Every time she claimed to be out, the data showed no deviation from the static signal of our residence. It was as if she was never leaving. The digital evidence, cold and unforgiving, was beginning to paint a picture that contradicted everything she had told me. In a moment of heated frustration and disbelief, I confronted myself with a painful question: if she wasn't really out, then where was she? My mind raced through possibilities, each more disturbing than the last. Could it be that while I was busy sneaking off to my own secret rendezvous, she was secretly keeping me under surveillance? Or, even worse, was she orchestrating an elaborate plan to catch me off guard? My inner turmoil pushed me further down this rabbit hole. Late one night, while rifling through old photographs on my laptop, I noticed a peculiar detail in one of the images from a supposed night out. The background of the shot, which I had assumed was a cozy cafe, was unmistakably the familiar setting of our own kitchen. The realization sent a chill down my spine. It was as if every detail in her carefully constructed stories was designed to mislead, an illusion of freedom that she never truly embraced. Desperate for some form of clarity, I reached out to a longtime acquaintance who had dabbled in investigative work. Over a series of hushed phone calls, I recounted the mounting evidence, the stationary car, the digital footprints that never left home, and the photos that betrayed her claims. His response was measured but ominous. "There's a pattern here," he said gravely. "Sometimes, the biggest deceptions are the ones we believe we control." He hinted that the situation might be far more complex than simple infidelity or harmless pretense. I began to wonder if I had unwittingly stepped into a dangerous game, one where the roles of the deceiver and the deceived might be reversibly blurred. As I sat in the dim glow of my study, surrounded by scattered notes and digital logs, a single, haunting thought kept echoing in my mind: the truth was hidden in plain sight, behind the facade of everyday normalcy. Every friend outing was a carefully rehearsed act, every social media post a piece of an intricate puzzle. And as the evidence piled up, a cold realization settled over me: I was on the brink of uncovering a secret that might shatter everything I thought I knew about our marriage. I ended that night with a storm of questions swirling in my head, and a single, burning resolve: I had to find out what was really happening behind the curtains of our once happy home. Whatever the truth, I knew one thing for certain: it wasn't as simple as Rebecca enjoying the company of friends. There was something else at play, something far more intricate and unsettling than I had ever imagined. Determined to unearth the truth behind Rebecca's increasingly frequent friend outings, I resolved to turn my growing suspicions into cold, hard evidence. Over the past few weeks, every little detail had added up: the car that never left the driveway, the social media posts mysteriously transmitted from our home's Wi-Fi, and the uncanny consistency in her excuses. It was time to go beyond casual observation and employ a more deliberate strategy. Late one autumn evening, after Rebecca had left with a hastily mentioned appointment that I suspected was nothing more than a rehearsed line, I set up a series of discreet cameras around the house. I placed one in the living room, another near the hallway, and a particularly well-hidden one in the area adjacent to a rarely used closet that led off the main corridor. I rationalized it as a measure to protect our home, but deep inside, I knew I was driven by a desperate need to catch her in the act of fabricating her life. That night, with the house plunged into a heavy silence, I sat in my study reviewing the digital logs from the cameras on my laptop. The first couple of hours yielded nothing unusual, only the quiet passage of time, punctuated by the familiar hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of settling wood. Yet, as midnight edged closer, the atmosphere in the house seemed to change. I noticed a faint sound, almost imperceptible at first, coming from near the closet where I'd installed the hidden camera. I leaned forward, my heart pounding, as the video feed revealed Rebecca's figure emerging from the living room. But instead of heading toward the door as she normally would when leaving for an outing, she paused. She glanced over her shoulder as if ensuring she wasn't being watched, an action that made my blood run cold. Then, almost ritualistically, she approached the closet. With a careful, almost hesitant motion, she opened its door a crack. The camera's resolution wasn't perfect, but I caught a glimpse of a dimly lit interior, a space that I'd never seen before despite living in this house for years. From behind that door came hushed voices. I couldn't make out every word, but the tone was urgent, an exchange laden with emotion and secrecy. Rebecca's voice was soft yet edged with determination as she said, "I can't keep doing this, not if he finds out." There was a reply, low and reassuring, "You know what you must do. Just make sure everything is ready." The conversation was brief, but it sent a jolt through me. Here was proof that the woman I thought was busy socializing with friends was, in fact, engaging in clandestine activities within our own home. The next morning, I replayed the footage over and over, analyzing every frame for additional clues. I observed that after the conversation, Rebecca lingered in that hidden space for several minutes before emerging with a look of conflicted relief. There was something in her demeanor, a fleeting shadow of guilt mixed with resolve, that confirmed my worst fears. Her nightly escapes were not about reconnecting with old friends, but rather about meeting someone, or perhaps even something, she was determined to keep secret. My mind raced with questions. Who was this mysterious person on the other end of those hushed conversations? Had I misinterpreted the evidence, or was I finally witnessing the unraveling of a double life? The fact that every digital footprint pointed back to our home only deepened the mystery. If she wasn't really out with her friends, then where was she going, and what was at stake? In the days that followed, I expanded my surveillance. I installed additional monitoring on her phone usage and even began cross-referencing her social media activity with location data from our home's internet network. Every new piece of evidence seemed to weave a tangled web of deceit. Her messages were laced with coded language that made no sense to an untrained eye, but to me, they screamed of secrets too dangerous to be shared openly. One particularly revealing evening, as I was reviewing another segment of the camera footage, I noticed a pattern. On nights when she claimed to have friends' nights out, the hidden closet door was the only portal to a different reality, a reality where Rebecca's laughter was replaced by quiet, determined whispers. It was as if the closet was a gateway to a world she had constructed in secret, a world where she could be herself without the prying eyes of our marital life. Torn between betrayal and a desperate need for clarity, I found myself at a crossroads. Confronting her directly might shatter the fragile remnants of trust that still bound us, yet remaining silent would only let the secret deepen, feeding the cycle of deception. Every new piece of evidence I uncovered led to more questions. What was she planning? Who was involved? And perhaps most devastating of all, why would she hide such a crucial part of her life from me? As I sat in the darkness of our living room, the images from the hidden camera still fresh in my mind, I realized that I was now entangled in a conspiracy that reached far beyond simple late nights or innocuous outings. The truth, obscured by layers of carefully crafted lies, beckoned me to delve deeper. And despite the pain that awaited, I knew there was no turning back. That night, after replaying the footage from the hidden camera for what felt like the 100th time, I couldn't shake the sensation that I was only scratching the surface of a much deeper secret. The hushed voices I had overheard in that hidden closet were burned into my memory, a ghostly conversation that hinted at a clandestine world hidden behind the facade of our everyday life. Determined to push past my mounting confusion and fear, I resolved to capture more concrete evidence. I began by setting up a discreet microphone near the closet, one so small that it could be hidden behind a painting. My plan was simple: record the conversations in real time, so that every whispered word, every subtle intonation, could be analyzed later. For days, I waited in a state of anxious anticipation, combing through every second of silence that filled our once tranquil home. Then, on a night when the air was thick with tension, I heard it, the faint murmur of voices emanating from the closet. I listened intently as Rebecca's voice emerged first, tentative but laden with emotion. "I can't keep doing this, not if he finds out," she said, her tone both desperate and resolute. A deep, measured response followed: "You know what you must do. Just make sure everything is ready." The word struck me like a jolt, but it wasn't until later, as I rewound the recording, that I heard something that made my blood run cold, a sound I recognized all too well. There, buried in the overlapping voices, was a fragment of a voice that matched my own, quiet and almost too familiar to be real. For a long, agonizing moment, I sat frozen, disbelief and dread mingling in my mind. My heart pounded in my ears as I played back the snippet again. The tone, the cadence, everything about it was unmistakably mine. How could my voice be part of this secret conversation? Was it possible that while I was busy tracking her every move, I had been unknowingly playing a role in her hidden world? The more I listened, the more unsettling the implications became. I combed through old messages, emails, and call logs on my phone, trying to pinpoint any trace of a conversation that I might have forgotten, any sign of my own involvement in an affair I had never consciously embarked upon. The evidence was damning. A few months back, during one of my own late-night escapades that I had conveniently rationalized as harmless, I recalled a conversation with a friend that I had since suppressed. Yet, there was a memory of a voice, echoing words that now seemed eerily familiar. Was it possible that in my attempts to seek solace elsewhere, I had inadvertently crossed paths with someone from Rebecca's secretive circle? As these thoughts spiraled through my mind, a new, horrifying possibility emerged. Perhaps the clandestine meetings in the hidden closet weren't solely about her rendezvous with a mysterious lover. What if they were part of a complex exchange, one where our lives had become unwittingly intertwined in a double game of deception? Had I, in my own way, been feeding into a cycle of infidelity that neither of us had fully acknowledged? Determined to get to the bottom of this, I began re-examining every scrap of evidence from recent weeks. I dug into our financial records, looking for unusual transactions or phone bills that might hint at a secret line of communication. I revisited old photographs and social media posts, scrutinizing the timestamps and locations, desperate to find any correlation between my actions and the strange meetings taking place at home. The more I probed, the more I discovered inconsistencies, overlapping schedules, unexplained gaps in our digital footprints, and even a series of encrypted messages that seemed to reference events I couldn't recall participating in. In a moment of bitter clarity, I realized that the truth might not be as black and white as I had assumed. Here I was, convinced of Rebecca's betrayal, only to find signs that perhaps we were both ensnared in this tangled web. The realization that my own secret escapades might have played a part in setting the stage for her hidden meetings was both humbling and devastating. I began to suspect that the boundaries of our lives had blurred long before either of us knew it. Maybe, just maybe, the careful lies we told each other had spiraled into a double life where both partners were complicit in their deceptions. Anguished and conflicted, I spent the following days in a haze of paranoia and introspection. Every creak in the floorboard, every whisper of wind through the cracks in our windows, seemed to echo with the weight of betrayal. I oscillated between anger at Rebecca and a crushing guilt for the part one might have played. The audio recordings, the hidden camera footage, and the trail of digital breadcrumbs all hinted at a collusion that transcended simple infidelity. We were locked in a dangerous dance, each step driven by secrets, each move calculated to hide deeper truths. At last, I realized that I had reached a crossroads. The path ahead demanded a confrontation, not just with Rebecca, but with the very parts of myself that had allowed this intricate masquerade to unfold. I knew that the coming days would force me to confront painful realities, the possibility that our marriage was built on mutual betrayals and that the lies we had spun had become an inescapable prison. With a heavy heart and trembling resolve, I prepared myself to face the inevitable showdown, a reckoning that promised to reveal more secrets, shatter more illusions, and perhaps, finally, lead to a truth neither of us could escape. That morning, the weight of the hidden recordings and the fragments of my own voice haunted me as I sat across from Rebecca at our kitchen table. The early light streamed in through the window, casting long shadows on the worn wood, a stage set for a confrontation that neither of us had truly anticipated. I had spent countless hours replaying the hushed conversation from the closet, the lines of my voice intermingled with Rebecca's urgent whispers. Every word, every pause, challenged the reality I thought I knew. I began the conversation haltingly, "Rebecca, we need to talk. I've been noticing things, inconsistencies that I can't ignore anymore." My voice wavered, betraying the storm of emotions swirling inside me. Rebecca's eyes darted away for a moment, then met mine with an expression that mingled defiance, sorrow, and something else I couldn't immediately decipher. She hesitated before replying. "What do you mean?" she asked, her tone measured, as if bracing for an inevitable admission. I took a deep breath and slid a printed transcript of the audio recording across the table. The document, with its time-stamps and fragmented dialogue, was damning, a piece of evidence that cut through the comfortable veil of our shared life. Rebecca's hand trembled as she picked it up. For several long minutes, silence reigned between us. I watched as her face transformed, flickering with pain and a trace of resignation. "I never wanted you to find out this way," she murmured, barely audible. "There's so much more you don't understand." My heart pounded in my chest as I pressed, "Then help me understand. Who was that voice? Why does it sound like mine?" The question hung heavy in the air. I had always prided myself on being in control, yet here I was, unraveling a tapestry of lies that involved not only Rebecca's secret meetings but also an eerie overlap with my own past. Tears welled in her eyes as she leaned forward, her voice trembling with emotion. "It wasn't meant to hurt you," she began, "but we both played a part in something that spiraled beyond our control." Her confession spilled out in hurried whispers, as if she were racing against time. "You remember those nights when you left to meet your friends, when you claimed you were out enjoying life? You were, too. But neither of us truly went out." She paused, swallowing hard. "We were both caught up in a world of our own making. I arranged these meetings not just for myself, but for us, to confront what we've been hiding from each other." I stared at her, my mind reeling. Her words clashed with the evidence I had painstakingly gathered. "Are you saying, we've both been living double lives?" I asked, voice thick with disbelief. Rebecca's gaze dropped to the table as she admitted, "Yes. For so long, we created separate narratives to escape the monotony of our routine. I needed an outlet, an escape that would let me feel something real again. And I know you, too, craved a taste of that freedom." Her confession cut deep. Memories of my own secret rendezvous, the late nights, the whispered conversations with a friend whose face I couldn't fully recall, came crashing back. In a moment of bitter clarity, I realized that my carefully constructed suspicions about her outings had blinded me to the truth. We were both complicit in this intricate masquerade. The hidden closet, the coded messages, the digital breadcrumbs, they were pieces of a puzzle that connected our betrayals in ways I never expected. But the twist that shattered everything came next. Rebecca's eyes, now glistening with both regret and determination, locked onto mine. "There's something else," she confessed in a rush, "something we both need to confront." I discovered that our secret meetings were not merely escapes, they were orchestrated by someone else. Someone who has been manipulating our every move. My heart skipped a beat as her words echoed in the silent room. "I found encrypted messages on your phone and mine, messages that suggest our double lives were set up from the beginning. We weren't just indulging in our desires, we were pawns in a larger game, designed to feed off our mutual discontent." The revelation left me reeling. The carefully honed narrative of betrayal and deception now took on an entirely new dimension, a dark, external force that had exploited our vulnerabilities for its own twisted agenda. The very idea that we might have been manipulated from behind the scenes, our private sins staged like actors on a rigged play, was almost too terrible to accept. Anger, sorrow, and a desperate need for answers surged within me. I demanded, who is behind this? Who would orchestrate such a sick, elaborate game? Rebecca shook her head slowly, her voice barely a whisper. "I don't know the name, but I've been tracking a series of mysterious transactions and intercepted messages. There's a name that keeps appearing, a name that I'm convinced is the mastermind behind our downfall." In that charged moment, as the light shifted outside and the room filled with a somber twilight, I realized that the lies we had told each other had been only the surface. Beneath it lay a deeper conspiracy that threatened not only our marriage but our very sense of self. With our hearts pounding in unison, we knew that the time for secrets was over. Together, we had to unravel the threads of this web, no matter how painful the truth might be. The morning after our heart-wrenching confrontation, Rebecca and I found ourselves united by a desperate need for answers. We had laid bare our shared deceptions and the painful truth that our separate escapes were not mere acts of infidelity, but pieces in a larger, sinister puzzle. The encrypted messages, the meticulously planned friend outings, and the hidden conversations had all pointed to an external force manipulating our lives. Determined to expose this puppeteer, we combed through every scrap of evidence, every obscure transaction, until a pattern emerged that led us to a nondescript address on the outskirts of the city. The address was deceptively ordinary, a modest brick building with a faded sign that read Lancaster and Company. Consulting. Something about it made my skin crawl, as if the very walls whispered secrets. Rebecca and I hesitated only a moment before deciding that if we were to reclaim our lives, we had to confront the mastermind behind our orchestrated double lives. Under the cover of dusk, we drove to the location, our hearts pounding with a mixture of dread and grim resolve. Inside, the reception area was dimly lit and eerily silent. I remember every detail, the sterile scent of disinfectant mixed with an underlying tang of something metallic, the sparse furniture arranged with unsettling precision. A young receptionist looked up from her computer, her eyes betraying a hint of anxiety as she whispered, "Mr. Lancaster will see you now." There was no warmth in her voice, only a mechanical calm that set my nerves on edge. We were led into a conference room where a man with salt and pepper hair and an inscrutable expression awaited us. He introduced himself simply as Martin Lancaster. His calm demeanor and measured words belied the gravity of the situation. "I'm aware you have questions," he began, his tone devoid of malice yet laced with a chilling finality. "You've discovered that your lives have been manipulated. Everything you believed to be your own choices were, in fact, the calculated outcomes of a program designed to harvest the raw, unfiltered secrets of everyday couples." I leaned forward, anger and disbelief warring in my chest. "Harvest secrets? What do you mean?" I demanded. Lancaster's eyes flickered, and for a moment, he seemed almost sympathetic. "Our organization, an entity so deeply embedded in society's fabric that few are aware of its existence, collects data on personal behavior. The goal isn't to destroy lives, but to analyze human vulnerabilities, to predict and even steer behavior for profit. In your case, the elaborate web of deceit was orchestrated to gauge the limits of trust and betrayal." Rebecca's hand tightened around mine as I tried to process his words. The revelation was staggering. our mutual escapes, the clandestine meetings in our hidden closet, even the fabricated friend outings, all had been variables in a vast experiment. But why us? I asked, my voice trembling. Lancaster allowed himself a small, almost imperceptible smile. You both represented perfect case studies, individuals who felt trapped in a life of routine, yearning for something more thrilling, more authentic. The organization seeded the opportunities for escape, monitored your interactions, and then intervened subtly to amplify the emotional stakes. In doing so, they created a product, a marketable narrative of desire, betrayal, and redemption. As his words sank in, a new twist revealed itself. Lancaster's tone shifted, and he leaned in, his voice lowering conspiratorially. There's more, he said. Your actions, your secret rendezvous, were also meant to serve as a catalyst for a larger social experiment. The data gathered from you isn't just for profit, it's used to design targeted social interventions, to shape consumer behavior on a massive scale. In essence, you were both lab rats and, unknowingly, the architects of your own transformation. I felt a mixture of horror and bitter irony. The idea that our most intimate betrayals were commodified for corporate and political gain was too surreal to accept. So, everything was predetermined? I asked. Lancaster's gaze hardened. Not predetermined, but influenced. Every secret you guarded, every lie you told, was a thread in a tapestry that someone else was weaving. And now that you've uncovered the truth, there's no going back. In that charged moment, I realized the ultimate twist. While we had been ensnared in this elaborate game, our discovery of the manipulation had inadvertently triggered a chain reaction. The organization's grip on its subjects is always maintained by secrecy and denial, but once the truth is known, the control begins to unravel. I want out, Rebecca said firmly, her voice echoing the resolve that had slowly been building within us. We demand to have our data erased, our lives returned to their rightful course. Lancaster's expression was inscrutable as he regarded us. That is not a simple request, he replied, but perhaps the beginning of something new. The organization adapts to change, and sometimes, the disruption of the experiment is exactly what they need to recalibrate. His cryptic words left us with more questions than answers. Had we truly just broken free, or were we now marked as renegades, targets of an even more relentless pursuit? Before we could press further, the door behind us burst open and two figures in dark suits entered. They exchanged silent, knowing glances with Lancaster before one of them spoke. Mr. Lancaster, the experiment is over. With that, a flurry of activity ensued, files were swiftly deleted from computer systems, and Lancaster himself began typing furiously on a secure terminal. In a final, startling moment, he turned back to us and said, "You've forced our hand. Your data, along with that of every subject, is about to be purged." In that instant, relief mingled with dread. The purge would erase the digital footprints of our secret lives, potentially liberating us from the organization's grasp, but it would also leave a void, an absence of the very narrative that had defined our struggles for so long. As we left the building under a sky that promised a new dawn, I couldn't help but wonder if, in our quest for truth, we had unwittingly become catalysts for a larger change, a change that might one day free countless others from the invisible strings of manipulation. Rebecca and I exchanged a look, a mixture of sorrow for what was lost and cautious hope for what lay ahead. We had been pawns in a dangerous game, but now we held the power of awareness. The secrets that once threatened to shatter us had, in their final act, offered a chance at redemption. And as we drove away from that unremarkable building, I realized that sometimes, the most unpredictable twists come not from betrayal alone, but from the courage to confront it head-on.